What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the reveal of the number 18 team in my 2019 NFL Power Rankings, a deep dive into the Houston Texans. And I did not know until I sat down to do this video that I was going to be coming in very, very low on this Texans team. ESPN has them 8th, NFL Network has them 12th. So I guess I will not be earning any favors from the Houston faithful in this one, but if it's any consolation, I am starting a new tier of teams here, and I do need to give a shout out here to Star Shooter 7324 for keeping track of these tiers in the comments. So we will be wrapping up our C tier here. And moving on to the B tier with the Texans. Our C tier, for those that have been following, were teams that, I might not necessarily be picking these teams to go to the playoffs, but if they made it and maybe got eliminated in the first round, maybe snuck a playoff win in there, but not really legitimate Super Bowl contenders in any way, those were our C tier. Now the B tier, these are legitimate playoff teams, and the Texans only have 6 AFC teams ahead of them, so you only need me to be wrong about one of them. So I hope that's some consolation, Texans fans. But the big thing with this Texans team is getting over that hump, learning how not to be their NBA counterpart, the Rockets, and just be a regular season team that can win 10 to 12 games, because the Texans have proved that they can do that. The trick is, what do they need to do to be better than that and win multiple playoff games and become more of a Super Bowl contender? So that's what we're going to do in this video, really break down this roster. They don't need a whole lot to go right here for them to exceed this 18th ranking, so we'll talk about what they need to do to get there. If you enjoy this video, if you learned something, please do hit that like button. It's the easiest way to share this video and support my channel. Also, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a deep dive upload as we go. And then if you're shopping for tickets this summer, use promo code ThatFranchiseGuy on SeatGeek, where you're already going to get the best prices and the best seats, but you'll save $20 on your first purchase, so go check that out. If you're new to the series, what we do here is we go through the roster, we go through position by position, and we rank how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you will be looking at my own custom Madden roster. So while it is a video game, keep in mind they are my own ratings, and they accurately show how I perceive each player. After that, we go through the schedule, game by game, talk about this team's Vegas over-under and my win total expectations for this team. And now that we're getting into the B tier of legitimate playoff teams, we're going to go through divisional odds, Super Bowl odds, odds to make the playoffs, and really expand upon the end of this video. If you've been watching, you're going to get a little more towards the back end now as we continue to move forward. So not a whole lot has changed with this Texans team. Same coach, Bill O'Brien, someone that a lot of Texans fans here will point to and say he's the reason this team can't get over the hump. He's a terrible coach. I don't go that far. I think the narrative is that he's not a good coach. I think that, as we've seen, they fired their general manager. This team has suffered injuries. They've lacked depth. He has had no offensive line to work with. I think he has actually done more with less with this Houston team than most coaches in the NFL would do. So I know a lot of Texans fans like to think of him as a scapegoat. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think he's really holding this team back in any regard, and I think he could do a lot worse. And then you got the same defensive coordinator here in Romeo Crennel. So a lot of Texans fans are now going to say, wait, this team won 11 games last year. They won their division. How are you going to rank them 18th? Well, like I said, there's only 6 other AFC teams ahead of them. I've already said I consider this team a legitimate playoff contender, a team that could actually win multiple games. So don't get me wrong here with this ranking. But the thing is, every year it's a new league framework. You can't just copy and paste the 11 wins that this team won last year. A win in the NFL a lot of times can go either way to begin with, let alone every team getting healthy from year to year, new schedules, massive roster changes for other teams. Like, it's just a new league framework, and that's what differentiates these power rankings from what you're getting on ESPN, who ranked this team 8th. That is, like I said, pretty much a copy and paste of last year's standings. I'm sorry, the Houston Texans are not the 8th best team in the NFL. Can they get there? Sure. This team has elite superstar talent. Absolutely. It's the very reason they come in here ranked ahead of the Titans who just have a bunch of depth. The Texans have those players that a lot of teams are looking for. The problem here is getting A, just the depth to fill out, B, this offensive line to block anybody, and C, can Deshaun Watson solidify himself as a quarterback that can go punch for punch with Andrew Luck? That is a big question here, because he is and will continue to be the boogeyman for this Texans team, as Luck just yet again took a dump on this team in the playoffs. So let's go through this roster now, talk about who some of those players who might step up and fill out this depth, and also about Deshaun Watson here at the quarterback position. So coming in tied for 14th, and I actually tend to be a little higher on Deshaun Watson, which may surprise people, because usually when I'm lower on a team in the power rankings, it's because I don't like their quarterback and I think he's overrated. That is not the case with Deshaun Watson. He's got a very good processor. He is accurate. But what I walked away impressed by from last year is I saw a certain arm strength that I personally had not seen in the year before or at his time at Clemson. Now, there's a debate on whether or not you can actually develop arm strength. I do think that's a possibility. Maybe it is that I just hadn't seen it with my eyes on tape and something just clicked where I noticed it. But as far as my opinion and analysis of Deshaun Watson goes, I now have a much higher perception in terms of his ceiling. Because before, it was kind of, is he closer to Dak Prescott, Andy Dalton, where that, he might have a good processor, but his arm talent's always going to make it hard for him to accurately use the whole field. Well, we saw that a lot more last year, and now can he take that next step up with his processor, with that arm, with the overall accuracy paired with his obvious athletic traits, and get into that Andrew Luck game-breaking top 10 quarterback conversation that would change the landscape of this organization? And coming in here at tied for 14th, I do think he is on the boundary there. You see times where you think he can get there, and then you see games like the playoffs last year where you need him the most, where he's hesitant and missing throws and not making the right reads. And it's like, okay, where do you want to come in here, Watson? Do you want to be an elite game-breaking quarterback? Do you want to just be a tier 2 mobile guy like a Cam Newton? I don't know. Or are you actually going to be closer to a quarterback that you can't really rely on and lead your team to being in purgatory? His range could be anywhere in there, and this year is going to be very telling. But I will credit him. Last year, he did a great job carrying this offense at times. He had no blocking. Hopefully, it can improve this year, and we can see an even better version of Deshaun Watson in year 3, because I do think he's taken strides each year as far as his tape is concerned. I don't really care about his stats. They were ridiculous as a rookie. Nobody expected those to continue. It was just an outlier. So after him, you got A.J. McCarron, Joe Webb, whatever. The season's done. If Watson gets hurt, no point in talking about those guys. So tied for 14th at quarterback. Then at running back, Lamar Miller. Can I just skip forward? Do I really have to talk about Lamar Miller? He's so boring. He's fast, I guess. He's a good Madden running back. He's fine. It's Lamar Miller. Why have they not drafted anyone in the second or third round? Why did they not sign a second level Tevin Coleman or Mark Ingram? I don't get what they're doing here. Do we really like Donta Foreman here? I know Texans fans do. He's, again, just not moving the needle. He's a power back. Hell, I like Karan Higdon a lot better than Donta Foreman, who this team picked up as an undrafted free agent. I think he can stretch the ball outside and catch the ball out of the backfield better. So I really don't like the running back room here. It's not that we put a lot of weight in that position anyway. Lamar Miller's fine. He's a starting caliber running back, I guess, but it just confuses me why this team hasn't done a better job filling out this room like pretty much every team in the NFL has. And then you got Buddy Howell, Tywan Jones, Josh Ferguson, whatever. These guys probably won't be on the team by the end of the year. So they're coming in 31st for running back. I really just don't want to spend time talking about this running back room. It's not exciting, and it only gets 2% in my power rankings anyway. I will credit them for not, over-investing in the position and being one of these New York teams, drafting Saquon Barkley second overall or paying Le'Veon Bell $60 million. This is better than that. But you also got to, follow league trends and take a Alvin Kamara type in the second or third round. They're not that hard to find. Like, most people can find solid running backs in the second, third, fourth round, or just sign an established one like Tevin Coleman or Mark Ingram. But anyway, let's move on. Talk about the wide receiver room. It all starts with DeAndre Hopkins. They're going to come in tied for 5th, despite the fact that they have the clear-cut alpha wide receiver in the NFL, DeAndre Hopkins. Best contested catch wide receiver, most likely in the NFL. Elite route runner. Deceiving speed for a guy that didn't run that fast of a 40 time. This dude is simply elevating this wide receiver rank of 5th, elevating the play of Deshaun Watson and elevating the play of this offense. But behind him, you got Will Fuller, excellent number 2 wide receiver, a great deep threat, has even shown better catch and run ability than he did in college. But the problem with Will Fuller is exactly what most analysts said when he got drafted here in the first round, is that he's a good player, but he will not be able to stay healthy, and that is exactly what is held up. And despite what Texans fans want to believe about Will Fuller, you cannot expect him to play 16 games. So he's going to be almost like Deshaun Jackson, where you get about 10 to 12 games a year. You're happy when you have him, but you have got to prepare for him not to stay healthy, which in my opinion, this roster is not built for. You have Keke Kuti, who's a good slot receiver, a second-year, 4th-round pick from last year. I don't see him as a guy that can step outside, be a deep threat. Yes, he's fast, but he has never been able to succeed in that role throughout his career. In fact, they traded for Demaryius Thomas last year because they did not trust Keke Kuti to get that done. He is a slot weapon, and a very good one at that, but the depth here is terrible. You have Vincent Smith, an undrafted guy from last year that I guess got on the field for whatever that's worth. DeAndre Carter, a good athlete who's bounced around the league, but he's more of a kick returner at this point. Jester Way, Stephen Mitchell, Isaac Whitney. You really want to rely on these guys to get playing time if something happened to Will Fuller or, God forbid, DeAndre Hopkins. They pick up Johnny Dixon as an undrafted guy out of free Ohio State. He's intriguing at least, but good God, the depth here is miserable. And then you look at the tight end room. Well, they have the 2 Jordans here, Jordan Akins, Jordan Thomas. They both kind of showed some flashes last year as mid-round picks, as rookies last year, but this team clearly not convinced in either of them as a true number 1 tight end, both maybe a tight end 2, a tight end 3, whatever, as they take Cahill Waring in the 3rd round. You know, he's an interesting conversation to be had, incredibly raw coming out, just did not play football a lot. I think it was his first year in college playing football. So a very good athlete. Really, you would not expect a guy with that little experience to look that good. So maybe he develops faster than we expect. But a guy that is going to have a transition here as a young learning player. I do not really expect him to play much, frankly, as a 3rd-round pick here in his rookie year, but you can bring him up in a conversation as a guy like Travis Kelce, who is the best tight end in the NFL now, but was almost unknown as a rookie and took time as that freak athlete to develop. And that's why you like bringing in Darren Fells here, who we saw from Hard Knocks as a good coach on the field here. There's not a ton of great tight end coaches in the NFL, so to get a guy who can play and teach these guys how to block, not just Cahill Waring, but the 2 Jordans and Jarrell Adams, who was, just pretty much a bust, but he was a late round pick, just a freak athlete that doesn't really know how to play football. Maybe Darren Fells can get to him, probably not, probably doesn't make the team. So the tight end room is intriguing, but you're not really moving the needle there at tight end. So the wide receiver room as a whole coming in tied for 5th, but they have got to stay healthy because the drop-off after Fuller and Hopkins is miserable from your traditional outside wide receivers. But regardless, Watson's got some nice weapons to throw to. But the offensive line here, coming in tied for 30th, is far and away the biggest reason this team is coming in 18th and why I can't rank them 8th like ESPN did, Yeah, it's great. They've got Watson. They've got Hopkins. It's exciting. They won 11 games last year. They can't effing block anyone, and I don't see it being much better this year. So we always start with the tackles. And this team in the first round let the Eagles trade ahead of them to take Andre Dillard, who was one of the best pass protecting tackle prospects I've evaluated in the last 5 years. Like, you really couldn't part with that 3rd round pick. you spend on a developmental tight end to go and get an actual franchise tackle. So they panic and they take Titus Howard, who was, I guess, the next tackle on their board. He was a third-round prospect, and I think a lot of people knew that. And when he got to camp and looked raw, like we all knew he would, as an athletic guy from a lower-level school, coming in here against higher-level competition, looking a little confused, I think that may have actually been the nail in the coffin that got Brian Gayton fired. So who's starting at tackle here? At left tackle, they're hoping it's Matt Khalil, who has never stayed healthy, and even when he is healthy, can't really play football. So that's your best tackle option, Houston. That's really, really great. Yeah. Right tackle, you're going to have a big old fat competition here. Julian Davenport, a 4th-round pick in 2017 that has had no consistency or any reason you would feel comfortable starting him at right tackle. Seantrell Henderson, who has played guard, has played tackle, never at a high level for multiple teams. You've got Titus Howard, who we just mentioned, a raw player that should have been a 3rd-round pick that you took in the 1st. Max Sharping, possibly the best of those 4. He is a refined player. He started every year at, I think it was Northern Illinois, but he lacks that physical upside. I really do think, despite Houston listing him right now as a guard, it'd be pretty dumb to not try out Max Sharping at right tackle, because, to be honest, the interior here is at least serviceable. You got Zach Fulton, Nick Martin, they can play. Senio Clemente, you could do worse than him. Martinez Rankin, a 3rd-round pick last year. You've got some players that can play on the inside at least. You don't need Max Sharping, who you spent a 2nd-round pick on, to play interior. You need help at tackle now, and Sharping might just be the best tackle that you can roll out there. So we'll see what they do there. But, I mean, that's really the end of the conversation, man. Nobody has offensive line depth in the NFL, especially this Texans team. You got a bunch of bodies at tackle, but no one you're comfortable with. At the end of the day, Deshaun Watson's just going to be running for his life again. It's going to make it harder on him to develop into that elite guy, and it's going to make it harder for you to go head-to-head with an Andrew Luck, who now has an elite offensive line. So that's the offensive review. They do come in 18th. Despite a miserable offensive line and a lack of depth, you do still have a quarterback to get excited about and a very explosive group of receivers. So I'm not trying to just, shit on this offense, but it is frustrating that they've really struggled to put better blocking around Deshaun Watson, and I do strongly believe that it's going to, at many times this season, hold this team back depending on the types of lines that they're playing, just like we've seen with teams like Seattle and the Vikings over the last few years, where they're just kind of helpless when they go against great pass rushes. And it's going to be more of the same here. Now you have a quarterback that can create, but even then it's going to be inconsistent. So let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, where it is better. They do come in 12th, but they have holes there as well. Now it's going to look pretty similar to what we've seen the last few years. Really good front 7, questions in the secondary. It's kind of been the conversation about this team, but let's go through the roster here. So let's start talking about the run defense here. Obviously, we don't put a lot of emphasis in run defense just because of week-to-week variance, ability to scheme up run defense, and just the overall depth of interior defensive linemen in the league. But all that said, Houston did have one of the best run defenses in the NFL last year, and I would not expect that to change much here. You've got a good D-line here. DJ Reader, J.J. Watt, very good interior run defenders. J.J. Watt will play on the edge sometimes as well. He's that flex defensive end in this scheme. You've also got Carlos Watkins here. Now, he is going to have to, I think, be the guy that steps up to fill the void left by Christian Covington, who had a very good year in terms of run defense for this team. 4th-round pick. They've done a good job developing DJ Reader, who was the guy ahead of Carlos Watkins there in Clemson, and they also signed Albert Huggins out of Clemson, so they're just kind of following this train of Clemson defensive tackles. But I do think Carlos Watkins, though he has not really had that opportunity yet to prove himself, takes a nice step up as a good interior run defender. Then you got Brandon Dunn, Angelo Blackson, Joel Heath. That's your rotation. They also draft Charles Omenihu in the 5th round. Maybe he surprises and fills that Christian Covington void as well. You got plenty of snaps that need to be filled by someone there. I have full confidence because it's the NFL and pretty much anyone off the street can play good run defense on the interior, that someone here will do it. So we don't really need to spend more time talking about it. Let's talk about what actually matters here, the pass rush. So the run defense, by the way, does rank tied for 5th, and the pass rush here comes in tied for 7th. So it is a borderline elite pass rush here. It all starts with J.J. Watt, who, yeah, he's not what he once was, which was an Aaron Donald top 3 defensive player of all time type of impact, but he is still absolutely incredible. He had 17 sacks last year, 78 total pressures. Like, the dude is still an absolute monster and a mismatch problem, and the biggest reason this pass rush is in the top 7. And I fully expect him to have, despite his injury concerns, 2+ elite years here. And then the number 2 guy is Jadeveon Clowney, who is a very good player. That he's playing on the franchise tag here. I don't think this team should trade him like it's been rumored, because you got that quarterback on a rookie contract. You should be able to figure out how to keep him around for the time being. Now, I don't see him playing his entire career here in Houston, because you're paying J.J. Watt, you're paying Deshaun Watson soon, you've paid DeAndre Hopkins, and I don't think Jadeveon Clowney is a $22, $23 million pass rusher, which is what he's going to demand on the open market. You know, Clowney, he's like an iPhone. A lot of people want him. He's a very good product. But if I'm paying that premium, give me a Samsung. Clowney's had 63, 64 pressures the last couple years. That's sweet. He's never gotten over that mark in his career. But I can get that from Ryan Kerrigan, Zadarius Smith, Jabal Sheard, Cam Wake. He had 54 pressures in 14 games last year. Like, you can replace Jadeveon Clowney, Houston. I don't think you should really be as scared of losing Jadeveon Clowney in a year or two as it might sound. Very good player and a productive player, especially as a number 2 pass rusher here, but I do think at some point you're gonna lose him, though I would keep him and not trade him this year. And then after him, you got Whitney Merciless, declining veteran, but at this point as your number 3 pass rusher, who's not going to attract a lot of attention with what Watt and Clowney bring to the table. He's a nice piece. And then you've got some younger developmental guys that I actually like here. Now, Duke Ejiofor, problems with the injuries. There was a time he was a first-round prospect. He fell a lot in the draft. And he's kind of the sob story that we didn't necessarily get with Carl Lawson, who was a very good college prospect who had injury concerns as well, who's been killing it for the Bengals. Well, Duke Ejiofor, unfortunately, has not been able to stay healthy and capitalize on that upside. So we'll see if he can turn that around. It does seem unlikely. But I did think the Texans had, in my opinion, the best undrafted pickup in the entire league of any position in Jamal Davis. My comparison, I kid you not, on my draft board for this player was Yannick Ngakoue. I don't know how he went undrafted. He has the best first step of any pass rusher in this class, and keep an eye on this guy. He's a long shot at this point. I'm ready to admit that I was wrong, but I was stunned when the draft ended, and I was like, wait, where did Jamal Davis go? He did not get drafted? What? So keep an eye on Jamal Davis out of Akron. Very good player. Then you got Brendan Scarlett, Chris Landrum, Davin Bellamy. Those guys will all compete on the edge. The interior guys here, we did mention J.J. Watt, but you don't really expect a whole lot of pass rush here from Watkins or DJ Reader. Maybe Charles Omenihu as a 5th-round pick can throw his name into that conversation as more of a undersized interior guy, a guy that probably would have been an edge if a 4-3 team drafted him. Kind of that J.J. Watt, type of player, not a caliber of player. So that's the pass rush there, coming in tied for 7th. Then the linebacker room here comes in tied for 14th, so a really good unit that rounds out what goes down as one of the better front sevens in the entire NFL. So I think the conversation starts with Zach Cunningham, who has incredible upside now, really dominant rookie year, versatile, full-size linebacker prospect, really has that 3-down potential as a guy who can stop the run, but more importantly, be a good cover linebacker and be a good athlete and have that range to cut off the short to intermediate passing games. So he's a guy that did have a slow start to last season, but really came into his own down the stretch. I could see some Texans fans criticizing my Madden rating of him. That just is reflective of him still being young, linebacker ratings in general being much lower, and some consistency issues for him. But if he can really, put together a 16-game stretch of games like we've seen from him at times, he could certainly get into the conversation for one of the 10 best linebackers in the NFL. And then Benardrick McKinney is very good as well. Traditionally has just been a dominant run defender, certainly one of the best run defending linebackers, if not the best in the NFL. I mean, the way he's able to take on blocks at his size, like 6'5", 255, like he's just a monster. But he actually took some steps up as a full 3-down coverage linebacker last year, and a lot of that was because Dylan Cole seemed to really struggle, an undrafted free agent in 2017 that was one of the more surprising rookies as a whole from that class, but just absolutely depressingly bad year last year in coverage. He ends up losing a lot of playing time, a player that had a lot of buzz entering last year that has now kind of been swept under the rug. Gonna still have a role here, but I think the conversation for him has changed pretty drastically. So behind him, you got Peter Colombi, a 6th-round pick last year, Tyrell Adams, Xavier Woodson-Looster, no one really worth talking about there. But 14th at linebacker, certainly Zach Cunningham in his 3rd season could take a big step up and get this linebacker group into the top 10. And then, if they've got a top 10 run defense, pass rush, and linebacker group, I mean, man, that's pretty hard to make a case for them to not be the best front 7 in the NFL. So if they've got this dominant front 7, why are they the 12th ranked defense? Well, we have yet to talk about this secondary. And, we've been saying this roster is more or less the same, but the secondary, it's not the same. You've got a lot of question marks here. And, we've kind of mentioned 2016, even 2017, like the secondary and coverage unit had led to some very atrocious games here. Games where this team looked like they couldn't tackle, like they couldn't cover, giving up 45-plus points. This team can't get back to that. But in 2018, they got a massive performance from Kareem Jackson, who was a flexible corner safety type who had the best year of his career by a landslide. He actually went on to get paid a lot of money to go play whatever Denver asks him to do. And then the same can be said about them adding Tyrann Mathieu last year. I don't think it was a coincidence that when they brought him in, a lot of those issues in the secondary were cured. So both of those players are gone. Andre Hal is gone. He's a good player. He was always a little overrated in my opinion. So you've got a lot of snaps and high caliber snaps, frankly, that need to be replaced here. Another question mark is going to be Jonathan Joseph, who's now 35 years old. Now, he hasn't given us any reason outside of him being 7,000 years old for why he couldn't cover well again this year, but that's a question mark for me. That, at that age, these guys can drop off at any moment. So that's playing with fire there with Jonathan Joseph as by far your best outside corner. And then, I'm seeing on Our Lads, they're actually listing Aaron Colvin as the outside corner. He played all right in the nickel last year because they signed Bradley Roby to try and replace some of those reps they got from Kareem Jackson. Now, that does intrigue me. That's, again, a big question mark because Bradley Roby as an outside corner in Denver with a great secondary coach playing next to Chris Harris and behind an excellent pass rush, really struggled, and he only got like a 1-year prove-it-year deal here. But if they're going to try him in the nickel where he might be able to utilize some of that elite quickness that he has, maybe he can turn his career around. So, that's a higher upside signing right there. I'd be a little excited about what he might be able to do, especially if they're going to use him in the nickel. And Aaron Colvin's just kind of a solid vet. I think he could kick outside and be at least a replacement level starter as a corner, but it's not like you have any dominant factors there at corner. And if the Bradley Roby, Aaron Colvin situation does not play out, you got nobody. I mean, I'm sorry if you're excited about Lonnie Johnson. I think it's a terrible scheme fit myself. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. He could have been a great fit in a Seattle cover 3 style scheme that's going to keep him on one side of the field, keep him in that sideline third cover 3 press man role. But in a traditional 3-4 more aggressive blitzing scheme here, that's going to move these guys around a little more and ask a little more in terms of horizontal coverage skills as opposed to just straight line vertical coverage skills where Lonnie Johnson can thrive. I don't see him coming in here and winning a job on the outside here at corner. I did not think that was a good pick at all. He could totally prove me wrong, but I just don't see it there. Jonathan Batamosi is a veteran. Xavier Crawford, a 6th round pick. Jermaine Kelly, Derek Beatty, an undrafted free agent. Deontay Burton, who they picked up from Atlanta. Like, the depth just stinks here. I'm sorry if you're a Lonnie Johnson truther here. I just don't see it. So cornerback is a weakness. Now, if it weren't for Justin Reed here, this could, frankly, you could make an argument for this being the worst secondary in the NFL. But they do have Justin Reed, who is a monster. I've been harping on this secondary, but Justin Reed has a high upside. And that's saying a lot because a lot of these rookie safeties actually take a year or two to really come into their own. A couple comparisons for Justin Reed right now would be Eddie Jackson, Kevin Byard, who did have slower rookie years as mid-round picks, but a similar athlete here in Justin Reed who was a very dominant safety as a rookie. Maybe it was an outlier and he takes a step back. I don't think so. I had a 1st round grade on him coming out and they stole him in the 3rd round. So you like what you have there. You expect that he can, step into some of the, great snaps that you got from Matthew and Kareem Jackson. But those are 2 players that started last year. One player can't fill all of those voids. They signed Deshaun Gibson to try and fill some of that. Jacksonville didn't seem to think he can play anymore. I think he can. I think he's got another good season or 2 in there, at least as a starting caliber safety. So that was a decent signing on the cheap. But he's not Tyrann Mathieu, and he's not what Kareem Jackson was last year. You signed Jaleel Adai as veteran depth. Breen Bodie-Calhoun, he's a very poor man's Tyrann Mathieu. Now, he's actually graded out very well in the nickel. He's going to be listed as a safety here. He'll compete for a starting slot corner position, I'm sure. He's good depth, but he's not necessarily someone I trust. So you got a bunch of names that we just mentioned. And I guess you got to throw out A.J. Hendy, A.J. Moore as guys that are going to compete at safety here. But you got a bunch of names, but Justin Reed's a potential star, but a young player that has to prove that, and everyone else is pretty much just a replacement level starter, honestly, if you project some regression there for Jonathan Joseph. So the 12th ranking for defense is going to be dragged down, I think, by this secondary because it is a very good front seven, a very good pass rush. I said some negative things about some of those guys, but it really is a good pass rush. The coverage on the short game is very good with these linebackers, and they stopped the run lights out last year thanks to a good D-line and Benardrick McKinney. But if the receivers are torturing guys in this secondary, it just might not matter. So 12th for the defense. Perhaps a slight step down from how good they were last year, but it should still be a very good defense. And then as far as the coach and culture is concerned, I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I do consider Bill O'Brien slightly underrated. I think he is a good offensive mind. And if the new general manager here, Nick Caserio, who it sounds like is who the Texans are going to get. There's a bit of a controversy going on with some collusion or tampering or whatever. It sounds like it's going to be Nick. If he can put some better talent around Bill O'Brien in terms of the depth and the offensive line, I think this narrative that he's a bad coach will go by the way, because he has done a lot with this Texans team. So let's transition here and talk about my expectations, the schedule here, the Vegas odds, all that. The schedule's not that bad. I do have them winning 9 games here. They got to start with New Orleans, but then they get 3 out of 4 at home and then at the Chargers, which actually isn't that bad, and I could have thrown a question mark next to it. Ultimately, I think the pass rush just too good from Bosa and Ingram there, and it's just going to be too much for the Texans, but I've got them starting 3-2. Carolina and Atlanta at home, those are 2 good games, and they just might split those, so I did give both of them a question mark to try and balance out for that. I just couldn't pick which one they might win or which one they might lose. At Kansas City, at Indianapolis, tough games. 2 of the best teams in the conference and 2 of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Then they got the Raiders at home, should be able to take care of that, no problem. They got Jacksonville and London, not going to be an easy game. They've struggled with Jacksonville's pass rush, might be the same there. Jacksonville's comfortable in the UK. Then a very nice stretch here. So if they can steal that game in London or go into LA and beat the Chargers, that's how you could get into the 10-win conversation for this team, because down the stretch you got a 3-game home stretch after going to Baltimore, who I'm very low on this year. So you got Indianapolis, New England, Denver. Got them going 2 of those 3. But 5 of 7 down the stretch, as I've got them beating Tampa Bay on the road and Tennessee at home to wrap up the year to try and push their way into the playoffs after some harder road games earlier on in their schedule. So their over-under is 8.5, and I'm actually saying 9 wins here. So I'm higher on them in terms of Vegas, but lower on them in terms of the echo chamber, ESPN, NFL networks of the world. Funny how that works out. It's almost like Vegas and I think critically as opposed to ESPN and NFL network. But hey, let's not drone on about that. The win range did actually come out to 5-10. 5 wins would be a nightmare season. That would be... They can't get anything going because the offensive line sucks, and everything we said about that secondary goes as bad as we said, and you don't get Bradley Roby to be a starting caliber player, and Justin Reed takes a step down in his second year from some natural regression or some bad thing like that. I do have a kind of a hard time seeing this team getting to 10 wins. I wouldn't completely rule it out, and that's a good transition here because, we mentioned the over-under here. I've kind of mentioned already that they just aren't really in a position to take on the Colts right now, in my opinion. Just a much better football team. So I don't really like the Texans at plus 220 to win the division. But hear me out on the playoff odds. I know I've been kind of negative about the Texans here. I really don't feel like I'm negative on the Texans. But once I saw ESPN rank them 8th, I just got this kind of condescending tone about it. They are plus 135 to make the playoffs. And I've got them winning 9 games here. Like I said, there's only 6 other teams that I rank ahead of them in the AFC, so you only need a couple things to go right here, and you could very well make the playoffs with 9 or 10 wins here. So that's actually not a bad bet at plus 135, and Vegas clearly shares a lot of these opinions I have about Houston, that they do have some holes and a lot to kind of figure out here in what could go down as a transition year. But anyway, Texans fans, let me know what you think. Do you share any of this pessimism? Do I drive you crazy not ranking this team in the top 10 and projecting them to win 2 more games than they did last year? Let me know. Please do hit that like button if you enjoyed, if you learned something. Peace out as always, guys, and we'll see you for the next one.